Welcome everybody to the Capital Outlay Committee meeting, and today is June the 17th. We have all the paperwork that we've been looking at online, and fortunately the town administrator will be here in a couple of minutes, and he was busy putting together an agenda for us to cover, okay? So that, I know we have new members here, why don't we go sort of around the horn, and let me have your names so that we introduce ourselves to the audience, and who do you represent, what committee?
Okay. Mark Kelleher, I represent the Finance Committee.
Karen Doucette, I also represent the Finance Committee.
Rich Larius, and I represent the town administrator.
Bob Osworth, Town Administrator.
Martha Donovan, Select Board.
Very good. We're not going to be discussing old business right now because we don't know where to start. Okay, so this is basically our first meeting after town meeting, and historically, we would, for years, start in September, okay? We don't normally meet during the summer. That's historically. I think we have a lot of business on the plate that we can actually affect. And I think that this is a good start as we are approaching July 4th in a couple of weeks. One of the things that we were fortunate to do is an hour ago, we spent close to an hour inspecting the, what wing? The
1990 wing of
the West
West.
1990 wing of the 204
204 Sisson Road.
Sisson Road, which a lot of people don't know what it is, but it's the building across from the fire department. So that's all I'm going to say. So our first business item is the on-site inspection of what we just did, and what's next for us. And that's an open question for everyone on the committee. And I'm glad to take whatever you say into account. Yes, Mark?
I think the next step is to do another tour with Sean Libby and to get kind of into the, what it's gonna take to bring that building not only up to code, but, I'd like to find out from him about the roof, the building envelope, what condition it is in, when that will need to be replaced, and the furnace, and to get a clearer understanding of what the uses of that building are. So in terms of not only heat, but air conditioning and control systems. So I think Sean Libby should be our next step with a visit like that, and then we can start to actually get some figures together.
Okay.
I think we also need the results of, Joe had already been working with a team of people to do a initial review of a few spaces in that building about whether or not they are up to code or what the gap is from the code to what they are now. The gym, the kitchen, auditorium, and that room that connects.
The music room.
The music room, yeah. I think those were all the things, yeah. So we need results of that. That was due today to him.
Okay.
Yeah, I would agree. Another meeting, another site inspection, not so much a meeting. My first impressions, it was my first time going through there. And it's a great resource. I think it's got great bones, just a lot of unknowns right now. But I'm looking forward to getting answers and learning more about the facility and how we can hopefully return it to greater use for the town.
Martha?
Yeah, so I sort of saw it as a multi-step process, right? Where, to Mark's point, what's needed in the infrastructure, to Karen's point, what has to happen in each of those rooms to make it up to code and commercially, being able to utilize it commercially. And then within each room, what's the equipment, how old is it, sort of an inventory of the equipment. And then the next piece is, what do we think the uses of those rooms could be to generate revenue? And then it's a prioritization of, because it's definitely going to be sort of a costly endeavor, however we try to do this. But we can't do it all at once, right? The town just doesn't have that kind of money. But how we would lay it out in sort of, and it's not us, it's really the town's priority, and then sort of attack it in small bites. So how I see the whole process.
Okay, well, since I was on the 2014, 15, it all, as you get older, it all gets very. What we saw today was looking at the newest part of that entity, okay,
Correct.
complex. I'm going to call it a complex, because if you looked at it, you had 1937, you had 1990, and then where the area we were not allowed to walk is another part that has to be addressed.
Right.
In my past visit there, I was more impressed on quote-unquote, what it's called today, the cultural center, the old building. From the outside, it looks wonderful. I mean, whoever did the brickwork, and the issue, I'm thinking, I'm going to say 20 years ago, was windows, leakage, mechanicals, heating. Anything you could think of an old building that looks nice, okay? And it's unfortunate that we didn't get to walk it, but I think Joe's objective today was to give you a view of the newest part of this complex. They all have separate issues, and much like Martha said, it's a multi-step process. The needs of what we saw today is far different than you'll see the needs of the 1937 building. And then, of course, there are no needs because it's been defined, you're not going to exist anymore, the back where the three study trailers are. So I think, we can say that Sean Lilly, we got to meet him. I think what we need, so we can get sort of a global view rather than doing, microscopic on the newer building. I think we need to see what 1937 looks like inside. To me, 20 years ago, I was much more impressed with that building. And of course, that's where the revenue we talked about is being generated. Majority of the revenue is being generated from, quote unquote, the cultural center. So I'll check with Joe if you're all in agreement, and we can come up with another day that we can all meet, again, like this morning, and maybe give us a little more time. Unfortunately, there's some happenings that have affected Joe's job today. So what we need is a little, and we'll call a meeting much like this, so that we can discuss what we just saw while it's fresh in our minds. If you haven't, I haven't seen or visited what they've done to the old building inside to make it work. I don't know how much they've invested in putting that building usable.
Can I make a suggestion that our request to link Sean is, I think we need to understand, we're getting really kind of into the weeds, as I think you sort of alluded to, about specific rooms. To me, we have to step back a bit and look at the more common structural things in that building that would impact all the buildings. And you can separate it to the old and new wing or east and west wing and have an assessment of those, but things like, to me, are the roof, the windows, electrical, plumbing, all the core functions in that building that are irrespective of whoever's living under them, or working under them, or doing whatever they're doing under them. To me, I would love to see Sean, he doesn't need we won't get that in a walkthrough, but if Sean has done that before, or could do that in relatively short order, to me, that would be hugely valuable. We can do 1,000,000 walkthroughs, but until we start to say, what's the list of the major systems, if you will, or, you know, whether it be, again, the roof or all that stuff, then I would love to get that as a starting point.
I think that's what Joe said was being done.
Well, he spoke about
It's
an
not
official
though.
committee. I mean, he spoke about, if I heard him correctly, there's supposed to be a group of individuals who is going to be responsible.
Who are providing him with information
Right.
in the next week, right?
But beyond that, where does that building,
So, yeah, if I may, that the people that are, what's due today to Joe is specifically about those 3 rooms we looked at today. It has got nothing to do with the roof or anything above it, or the underlying plumbing in the building, or electricity, or any of that stuff. It's got to, as it relates to that room, maybe, that specific room, but it doesn't, it's only those 3-4 rooms when that building is huge.
Right,
Well-
but I understand your point, but I also feel that the roof may need to be done in the next 5 years, right? But that doesn't mean you can't do something concurrently to get something done to generate some revenue. I mean, there's some existing things
Yeah, I
the town
didn't say
could do
that.
to increase revenue without doing a thing today, right?
Yeah, I agree.
And so there are a bunch of parallel courses
Why don't
here,
we-
as I see it.
Yeah, I don't disagree whatsoever. I would just like to get that part of it started as well. I think what Joe's team is focusing on and getting those rooms going and generating more revenue is absolutely awesome. So I'm not, hopefully I didn't suggest that at all, but,
why don't we do this, rather than assuming a lot, okay, and questioning in different tangents? Why don't we call a meeting in a week or two, we'll run it through Joe, and have Sean here?
I'd love it, yeah.
The issues that we're concerned about might consume discussions if we try another site visit. We sort of know this, and this. We know 3 components. He certainly is expert and has done analyses about each one of those pieces. So rather than trying to, guess, we'll have him come in, prepare your questions, and we'll get it straight from him.
Yeah, maybe we can send him our questions in advance.
No, I'd rather have a dialogue.
I think we need to give him a chance to
Yeah.
kind of go through the building, if he hasn't already.
We'll just say we're prepared to talk about the buildings.
Yeah, and to prepare maybe a report, a summary, whatever,
Oh,
this is what
yeah, I
I've
agree with
discovered, and.
If you
and
want to
then
put
question
together
him on-
questions, you're more
No,
than.
all I was, I think I may not be speaking clearly, because I'm not asking I'm just saying to give him a heads up of like, what's the breadth of the questions that we have, and it doesn't mean he's gonna come prepared with all the answers. It's more or less to say, if we try and do that in a meeting, somebody's gonna have to capture every single person's questions. It's just to say, give it to him ahead of time so he has a chance to consider.
Well,
Whatever you guys,
We'll
however, I
let
don't know how
Joe
you
talk to
function.
Sean,
Okay,
or I'll call Sean and we'll just,
That's probably something
Yeah.
Joe could probably,
yeah, I
Give
mean,
us an
it's
indication.
it's nothing new.
how much, does this person know that we're,
Sean's been working on this building for years,
okay.
so
he's-
it's sort of like,
He should know.
yes.
Yeah.
So it's nothing out of school for us
awesome.
to have him come in and give us the status, quote unquote, the status of 204 Sisson Road in terms of mechanical, structural,
Yeah.
or whatever,
Mhm.
for all the left side, the right side.
So I think we're just in the data gathering stage, if you will, and there's multiple parts of that, and so maybe what we do is make sure that Joe has the list, and here he is, so he knows what we're expecting.
Yeah. Well, come on in.
Good morning, folks.
Good morning.
For the purpose of full disclosure, I was informed by 2 individuals that I was a close contact. However, I have tested and I am negative, but out of an abundance of caution, I will keep my mask on during your meeting.
You just tested?
Correct.
Okay. Let me see the swab.
That's great.
Sure.
Okay, so let me just give you we're still on item A, okay?
And that would be the debrief from the site inspection?
Yes, and
Yep.
what the steps next. What we're requesting, we went through the entire committee and, you know, we've talked about what things look like, the things you're getting, the initial review from your staff. I thought I heard you might be putting a committee together
Thank you.
for that purpose to analyze where we stand. I could be wrong.
So I'm working presently through existing public bodies such as yours, and we'll be doing the same effort for the Finance Committee, as well as the Board of Selectmen if they so desire. At present, there is not a subgroup or a working group.
Okay,
I've been relying upon my staff as subject matter experts and others.
okay. What we need, and we can wrap this up quickly in a box kind of thing, because we could spend a whole day discussing where, when, how,
Sure.
and how much.
Yep.
Can we have Sean come in the next meeting of this group?
So what I'd like to recommend for your purposes is Sean join you on a site inspection first, so that you have an opportunity to hear from him directly on the building. And then if you want to, as you've done today, also do a public meeting. But I think it's going to be helpful for you folks to rely upon the exemption under the open meeting law to have that site inspection first with Sean. So let me back up, sorry. The answer is yes, I will be providing you with all the folks that you want to have. I just need to follow up with my team on next steps and coordinate with them on their calendars.
Well, I think members of this committee have questioned cost numbers, analysis numbers, what's been done in terms of looking at stuff before we went on a site visit.
Sure.
So,
So what I would suggest is it might be helpful to have Sean and I present, because Sean has told me that he'll tell you that a lot of the information that the town's relying upon, he was not a direct part of. That would be the work of the former middle school reuse repurposing committee, I believe it was, the appraisal documents that the town acquired. But yes, I think it's a wise step to have you talk to our facilities manager. I just think you folks would be well served to have a tour of the bones of the building as well.
talk about 1937.
So did you explain to the general public what that means?
Yes, I did.
Thank you, yes. Well, 1937 and 1990, because remember, the vast majority of that building is from 1990.
Yeah, what we've discussed basically is 2004 Sisson Road having three physical components. One is 1937 to 1990, and the working classrooms in the back.
Yep.
So those are the three components that we're looking at, and we've also reported that today we spent an hour going over 1990.
Yep,
We'd like to spend some time in 1937,
yep,
because that structurally, mechanicals and stuff
correct.
are
That's
far
the
older.
vast majority of
Right.
mechanical equipment is.
So the question is, what do you recommend? Do the site visit then meet with?
Yeah,
you two?
so, and again, I apologize, but I am talking to you, Mr. Chairman, and to a broader audience as well, and that would be the general public watching this. So I do just want to emphasize that the town has the right and has exercised the right under the open meeting law for a public body such as the Capital Outlay Committee to be part of an on-site inspection of a program or a project, and that is absolutely an exclusion exception from the open meeting law.
Okay.
So I don't want anyone to get the understanding that we're doing things underhanded. Rather, the reason why they changed that open meeting law is to give public bodies the chance to get into the nitty-gritty. But you've done a great thing where you've immediately followed it with an open meeting for deliberation.
Can
I
you-
would recommend that your next step be an on-site inspection to further inspect that building, which is both a program and a project, so the exemption will still exist, and then follow that up as soon as you can with a public meeting.
Would you coordinate that? for us?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep.
So we'll all chip in when the town administrator tells us, asks us.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, I see on your agenda that one of your last topics is your potential meeting schedule. So what we could do is work around your meeting schedule
Yes,
for the benefit of your membership and dovetail the two events.
okay.
going
So
forward.
we will close out A for now. Do you have a question on
Yeah,
A?
I just wanted to ask the clarification. You said you were going to get some information in the next week, I'm going to say, from people who are looking at various aspects of the building. Does that include the infrastructure of both buildings, like roof, mechanicals, all of that? Or is that specific to the area that we toured today?
So it's specific to what you toured today, and you're correct. And just to put it out there on the record, I have directed staff, appropriate staff, to review the kitchen and cafeteria area, so-called, the auditorium, the music room, or the green room, as other folks now call it, and the gymnasium. My next step after I get that is to report out to the Board of Selectmen, and then after that presentation, distribute it widely to everybody else.
Okay.
Meaning I have an obligation first to report to the executives of the town, and then we'll continue to keep you folks posted. But to the fine point, it's merely to those parts of the building in the 1990 wing that are not presently actively used on a daily basis.
Is that on the agenda for the Board of Selectmen on Monday?
It's not for the meeting on Tuesday because of the holiday. My anticipation was for that to be at their meeting on the 27th of June.
27. Thanks.
Okay.
And once that's confirmed, I'll let you folks
Yeah,
know as
sure.
well.
Okay, so we'll have follow-up on that. Everybody's in agreement?
Yeah,
Okay.
great.
More importantly, B, report on the June 14th bylaw charter review committee, discussion on the capital outlay plan. In the charter, this is an ongoing effort. Mr. Powers and I were invited by the bylaws charter review committee to give our recommendations and our feelings about any potential changes to the bylaws regarding the capital outlay committee and the capital outlay plan and the capital outlay budget, which are, we have discussed this over and over again. And for the new members, the plan is a 5-year view. The budget is the first year of the plan, okay? And you guys have input to that from the Finance Committee. This is one of the first times that the Capital Outlay Committee will address 5 years versus the first year, okay?
Cool.
And the committee was very open with us and very accommodating in terms of our concerns, our ideas, and what we, quote unquote, not Mr. Powers per se, but how I interpret the possible detriments of the changes in future years. And I'll just put it out that way. It's still open for discussion, and the Bylaws Committee, in fact, has invited us to participate as liaisons, or myself, or I may ask one of you to be the liaison to that committee. I don't know what authority they have to get to do so, but I've been liaisons to a number of committees, and you sit at the meeting and you listen and maybe ask a question or two. Joe, do you have any?
I agree with that concept of the liaison. I also understood it that a member of the bylaw charter review committee may also begin to liaise with you folks in a similar way, which is a great thing because it's two-way communication. Even though liaisons would not have a seat at the table or a vote or anything like that, it's not ex officio, it's just tying somebody in. Additionally, it's my understanding that Select Board member Julie Kavanaugh is going to be named the liaison to you folks on capital outlay, and she's indicated her strong desire to come to these meetings in that regard, so I think we're going to be able to strengthen communication. And then if this was an opening, Mr. Chairman, what I'd like to add further, first, I would be remiss if I didn't say that I think your chair did a great job offering insights on behalf of this committee. And the chairman is a little bit tame, if I could. He is well within his rights to talk about significant changes that occurred through bylaw charter review committee over the years that greatly impacted upon the capital outlay process and the committee. And the committee really didn't have an opportunity to participate in that. Good news is that's old news, it's water under the bridge, and a lot of the inconsistencies within our Chapter 9 of the Charter have been corrected through that effort and through discussions. The Bylaw Charter Review Committee is very interested in updating Chapter 9 of the Charter as it relates to capital. And then separately, they're very interested in perhaps doing the decennial look into, or 10-year look into our charter, which is always good practice, and that would be on everything. But as it relates to charter, and I believe you may have in front of you the elements of the charter that relate.
Yep.
So the first thing I want to draw your attention to is if you look at the section in Chapter 9, I think it's Section 6, that actually talks about capital outlay in the plan. And going off of memory, I believe it might be item B or C, but there's a definition that we in the town of Harwich rely upon as to what a capital outlay is. And there's a typo in the charter, which means it's not a typo, it's the present law. And it defines a capital outlay as $50,000. Not less than, not more than, not 50,000 or greater. It puts it right at 50,000. So what do you do when your governing documents, which are meant to be pristine, perfect, and the law of the land, you assume. And so I have always assumed that we meant that to be 50,000 or greater. More importantly, you have in front of you materials that I relied upon in the last year in developing the capital outlay plan for the 5 years. That begins fiscal year '23. And then I relied upon in my conversations with your chairman to the bylaw charter review on Tuesday evening. And so I just want to give you a quick explanation as I gave to them. The Department of Revenue, which is an executive agency under the governor in the Commonwealth, has a division known as the Division of Local Services, and it's a godsend for any of us that work in municipal government, and for you folks as well. So if you're ever looking to educate yourself, they have amazing information on all things municipal finance. And within that, they have a great primer on what they call a capital improvement program. So if nothing else, I like that title. I know it's meant by capital outlay, but I think it's a better use of the concept and the phrases to say capital improvement, because that's what we're dealing with. And an improvement is either, a renovation, rehabilitation, or purchase. But within those documents, I think you'll see a great framework that the bylaw charter review may rely heavily upon. They haven't decided yet. And it's just very helpful because they have in my opinion, very clear definitions. And so when they define a capital item in their sample bylaw, which is what we would adopt for our charter, they talk about something which is which is over 25,000, but it talks about has a useful life of at least 5 years. That's where the concept of the 5-year plan comes in. And is a tangible asset, et cetera, meaning we simply have one line that talks about the definition. The better practice is a much more defined and I think workable definition. Now, what I said to the bylaw charter review is the same thing I'll say to you folks. I'm not married to any of the words or the numbers. So whether it's over 25,000, over 50,000, whatever it may be, Department of Revenue will tell you that it's what fits to a community. It's the other things that it talks about where they're talking about tangible assets. And I think for some of you that have worked in the private sector and finance, that resonates more with you than maybe some other terms in local government accounting.
Let me just also say that we were given the original, if I'm not, 1993 version.
I believe, right. I believe that was the original impetus to create something on capital,
We were given,
and it's 30 years old.
this is what they were working as, I think they used as fundamental information of what drives the capital plan. Two things that I'm concerned about, and it didn't resonate, or it didn't come up during the meeting. I'm very concerned about, by definition, when we do our capital plan in the out years and it's approved, the issue concerns me greatly about changes to the out years, either up or down, the dollar volume, or the year it moves to. Does it move forward? Does it move back? We didn't get an opportunity to address that as a very big concern to this committee, I think. Because it will change the plan. When somebody comes in and says, well, you know, the thing that I have in the third year, I really want to put in the fourth year, and by the way, I want to change it the year, and I also want to drive it from 75,000 to 125,000. And we've heard that there's a requirement of a 2/3 vote from town meeting. Well, my concern is I'm thinking about what's the worst, if town meeting turns it down, what happens?
Right.
What happens to it? So you had something?
No, I just had a question. I was wondering what the concern was. So why is that a concern, that it goes back to town meeting?
The change goes back to town meeting and has a 2/3 vote to allow the change, even though we have prepared it in the new capital plan that we submitted for the new town meeting.
So, Rich, can I, to Karen's point, I think some of the issues are, and I said this at a select board meeting, the unintended consequences, right? If you're a department manager and you know that none of your numbers can go up, they can go down, but they can't go up, you're gonna be more generous with your planning in the out years, because who's gonna question you if a number goes down? Nobody. It doesn't have to go to a vote. I think my other, and I haven't said this out loud, but, you know, Joe's about to hire a number of new department heads. What if he hires somebody who is like the best, I don't know, I love Link Hooper. I hope he stays here forever, but DPW person, I'm just making this up.
Sure.
And he comes in and he says, hey, I don't think we're doing it right. We could do it differently, and I need a new plan. There's no flexibility in it. What if all of a sudden, you know, we have massive storm and flooding, and the whole tone of what we have to do in the town changes? There's no flexibility for that. It has to go to a vote. And my first town meeting was, I've been to the special town meeting, but was at the last one. And I was bowled over by the lack of concern about the amounts of money. There was relatively little discussion about budget items. And yet, Joe trying to change a procedure that basically is common accounting practice was an hour-long discussion. So I'm not sure that voters are, like, 5 years out is supposed to give you a feel for what we're gonna spend, and it's a lot of money. Nobody's gonna say it's not a lot of money. It's a lot of money. But it isn't set in stone. The idea is that in that 5 years, something can happen. We could get some money that we didn't plan on, or we could lose some money. Who knows what a recession's gonna do to all this? It could blow everything up. But you don't have any flexibility in the budget if every time you go to change something in the outer years has to be approved at town meeting.
Yeah, I understand that. So I think it's a greater flexibility in the out years, so you don't have to basically jump through.
Well,
hoops.
anything that's not approved in the capital budget, which is year one,
Yeah,
is part of this change,
yeah, got it.
whether it's the second,
Yep,
third,
I
fourth, or
understand.
And
fifth year.
town residents still have the ability to approve or not approve every capital item in the year that it's
Yeah,
going to be
agreed.
Well, the
expended,
article
which is, and to me, is the most control, right?
Yeah, remember that there's an article that matches the request.
Right,
There's an article that matches
the expenditure,
the expenditure
Right.
in the budget year.
right.
The other thing I was very concerned about, and I was thinking about it after we left, is they're very concerned about debt service. And that for years, debt service has been flat. So, you know, if you pay off a debt and you add a new one, it should be close to that and keep it a straight line. And I'm thinking, well, first you have something called inflation.
Right, right.
Then
That's-
you also have compression. There's a compression because the debt that we are looking at in the future is immense. So if you took the regular, I'm going to say regular debt service, the components that make that debt service, $5 million for the sake of it. And now you're adding something huge that was never anticipated in, let's say, the 17 years that got you, you know, this flat line. And all of a sudden, you can't compress what the debt service is going to be anticipated in the outer years for something like wastewater. You know, if we've been, for the sake of argument, if we've been, you know, our debt service has been $50 million, I don't know, $50 million for the past 17 years, and all of a sudden, wastewater generates something called 20 million a year, and it's added to something that the average has always been 50 million, you can't jump it to 70. Well, yes, you can. So you can't compress it. You can't,
Right.
you're going to have to drop.
It's a living organism
It
in
is.
many ways,
It-
right?
Yeah, I mean, Joe, I mean,
Thank you. All I wanted to do is toss a bomb and let you folks deal with it, so to speak. And I see some of you, if you haven't had a chance to read the DLS stuff, I think it's fantastic. And sorry, but I get excited about government documents and things like that. But here's a thought piece that I'd like to start with you folks that I haven't even really vetted of any degree, but motivated by what you read in the DLS framework. Is a multi-generational, multi-hundred million dollars in present day project mandated by federal and state agencies, such as a wastewater project. Is that really capital, or is that an extraordinary event that the town has been forced to deal with? And again, I just want to put that, you know, roll that out there on the court and come back to it later. But for me, and to the chairman's point, you'll actually find historically that our capital outlay program from my predecessors has been around the 2 to 5 million mark, within that 2 to 5 million a year. That's pretty much in line with what you would imagine from a $73 million municipal corporation known as a town that has 7 villages, 13,000 plus people, but an array of resort type offerings, meaning beaches, ponds, golfs, other waterways, other recreation, you know, all the stuff that goes with that. The outlier is now you have to do wastewater. And so, as the chairman's already said, when you look at fiscal year 24 or year 2 in the plan, I think it's something obscene like $42 million. But when you back out those extraordinary events that are related to water and wastewater, and by the way, there's more on the horizon, I'll touch on that later if you want me to, from new announcements from the Department of Environmental Protection. But when you back those out, I think we're looking at a $3.5 million capital plan. So how do, because we, when I say we, I certainly mean us as a collection of individuals in this room right now, but I can also say the royal we, that capital outlay, the finance committee, the board of selectmen, town meeting, water, wastewater commissioners, I don't know that we've ever had that conversation. Or if we've had, it bears repeating because a lot of the principal actors have changed. And so it's not a bad time to reevaluate those assumptions. Because I think I can make a cogent argument as to why extraordinary projects that emanate from state or federal or other agencies, you know, it's one thing if we woke up and said, you know what the right thing to do is? It's to sewer a portion of our town for whatever reason. We didn't do that. No one's done that. You know, it's more a reaction to external influences. The other part of all that, and the chairman's spoken very well about it, and it's a disconnect in our town. Our current capital plan talks about plan and budget, and it's the reverse of what DOR, DLS recommends as the best practice. Every year, we meet at town meeting to set our budget, our operating budget, our community preservation budget, and our capital budget, as well as some enterprise and other things. The budget is the thing that we anticipate talking about every year. We are in May of 2022. What is the budget for '23? Let's debate every aspect of that. But the way it's set up is it's the plan that's debated. And the budget and the articles pretty much sail through. That discussion about the amendment, that was an effort by a prior bylaw charter review committee in 2019, and I've described it as thus, as a former member of the bylaw charter review committee prior to that effort, as a former assistant town administrator in another town, and as the former assistant town administrator in this town. That was a deliberate effort to impact upon the town manager at the time. It was meant to handcuff that individual because of concerns that bylaw charter review and others had with that individual's processing, if you will. But as Martha said, the law of unintended consequences has been massive because their effort at town meeting in 2019 was incomplete and it was rife with errors. And so it took us 2 years to recognize that their first thought was it should be a 5-year plan and not a 7-year plan. And they said as much, but didn't correct it. It took us 2 years to do that. Why? Because COVID hit, and we were impacted with that. We still haven't corrected the fact that that a capital item is X dollars or more, et cetera, going forward. But what they achieved in 2019 was to say that any change to the capital plan requires, as parliamentarians like me would say, a supermajority vote. Predecessor left, I come on board, and the first thing I say is, what am I to do with that? Because as a parliamentarian, words matter. The charter says any amendment to the plan requires a 2/3 majority. What if we have to change a word? And members of the bylaw charter review have said, and this is an ongoing disagreement that I have, they've said, well, that's not what we meant. But that's not what it says in the governing document. And none of us can claim framers' intent or founders' intent like the constitutionalists will do. It's the word of law written in that book, because if it's ever challenged, either to the Attorney General or some outside force, that's what they're going to say. What did the word say? And so that has to go.
So,
If I may, one last point on that.
absolutely, yeah.
What they were trying to do was say, wait a second, if you bring a budget with articles to town meeting, we know that because it's in the warrant and we've talked about it for months at that point. But if you have a plan that's in an appendix in the book and you want to change something in the out year, you can't do that because that wasn't contemplated by the Capital Outlay Committee. And you've heard the longstanding chairman say, that's not a problem. I think if we change the mindset of budget is the important part of it, plan is exactly that. It's a plan. And then we don't really have to focus on the 2/3 because it says any change to the plan requires a 2/3 vote. And if I may,
Yeah.
you're absolutely right. The other law of unintended consequences, because I heard it from my department heads who were submitting. Well, you told us that a change is going to be nearly impossible, so I wanted to make sure I went to the highest possible dollar. So then you take that extraordinary effort of a sewer event, and you see, well, wait a second, those cruisers might cost 10 grand. Why? Well, I mean, I really think it's 5 because we're buying X number, but you don't know. And I don't want to get jammed up and have the numbers come in because we have a well thought out procurement process. So there's a lot of nitty details that aren't helping us right now.
So is that the goal of this bylaw committee's, what they're doing here, is they're gonna rewrite or reanalyze
Yes.
and then rewrite?
And if I may, yes, it is.
Charter.
And what they said Tuesday night is they were very impressed by the DOR, DLS stuff. Because what I said is, why don't we at least use that as a starting point?
And maybe have, because I would say, it sounds like we have a pretty lightly documented, whatever
Correct.
definition and process.
In my opinion, yep.
But we would strive for have something much more detailed and clear
Yep,
and flexible so that you can do your work
Exactly.
without
Yep.
running into
Yep.
a million problems.
so they've signaled,
So
I
they've
think,
seen this.
it's a willingness, correct?
They've seen this
They've got it.
document.
Correct, yes, I sent it to them a week in advance.
Because I do think on the improvement planning guide on page 1, it does an excellent job of describing the difference between a program and a budget.
Exactly,
And I think we all know what it is, and we've all tried in public meetings to talk about it,
right.
but I still am not sure everybody understands the nuance of the two.
Well, look, historically, this committee, until maybe 2 or 3 years ago, in the out years, we would just say it's a placeholder.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay? Real
exactly,
simple.
because
And it's, we
that-
can change it,
that's what you do when you're planning.
and I think it's so good to have that flexibility.
Correct.
And you go back, and what we sort of ended the meeting with them was, we present, the finance committee present, the selectmen present the warrant. Okay? But an hour before town meeting, there still could be a change. And it's that flexible.
Because the underlying, if I may, Mr. Chairman, the underlying assumptions and facts that we were operating on at the time changed.
Yeah.
And
The-
very-
I- About 4 years ago, I remember we had, the finance committee meets, capital outlay committee meets, and the selectmen meet 1 hour before town meeting, okay, separate rooms. And I remember the water department had forgotten to put $1 million capital expense in their planning.
Right, right,
Okay, they didn't submit it.
right.
And it was, we voted on it, you guys voted on it, and we gave it to them. Well,
Right.
according to this, then we'd have to have a 2/3, change everything. I'm just really confused, and hopefully we get through this, and we hope the Charter Review Committee and the Finance Committee and the Capital Outlay Committee sort of see a way to adjust numbers in a not a business sense, but
In a practical sense.
yes, that's the word.
Yes. I do think that the taxpayers do deserve at town meeting an explanation for why the out-year plan may have changed.
Absolutely.
You know, so as
course,
part of
yeah.
presenting
Absolutely.
that, I think, somebody has to get up and say, look, this is changed by X in these years, and this is a result of Y.
Yes.
Yep,
I think that's the information that people need to hear,
absolutely.
but I don't think it needs to be a vote. I just don't,
We-
I just don't,
We once attempted, and I think we should try it, we as the Finance Committee at Capital Outlay and the town administrator, is if there's something that grabs their attention, I'm just gonna say, grabs their attention, we should have the impact it has on a house worth, now, today, $500,000. So that if we say, hey, this is it's not gonna impact, or it will impact, or we see this, $5 million number go to $15 million, and the impact's gonna be $27 a year. I don't do that, but I think that, and we start off the meeting by saying, the problem that we have is that we have a lot of MBAs and CPAs and professional, certified planner kind of thing, number people, who talk about this as if it were, I want 1% milk instead of 2% milk. Is that okay with you?
right.
And I think it's not fair to the average taxpayer, okay? That I tend to say out of the 13,000 people that you have, 65–70% are senior citizens, and perhaps have been away from jobs or careers or professions that these new numbers and the new way they're approached and the algorithms, quote unquote, that what the hell's an algorithm, are today's way of doing things. And you have some lady or some guy just saying, well, $27 is not gonna kill me, I'll do it. I'll take it away from my Social Security. Well, that's not fair. And we speak of it as, regular terms, and it's gotta be put at a level where everybody understands it. And I think that was one of the things we try to achieve. Go
And I would just caution, you have to be careful because in the out years, you don't really know what your funding is gonna be, your funding source,
Right.
unfortunately. Like, there could be some federal money available for these sewer systems, please God.
We-
You know, and maybe not.
We've never had, in the years that they were used to called placeholders, and that was for years. For years, they were placeholders.
Yeah.
Nobody had a problem with calling it a placeholder.
Right.
Right.
What happened was, it got to a point where, what the hell are we doing placeholders for? Just make them zero. So you look at some capital plans that were made 7 years ago, 8 years ago, and it was, the town administrator's approach was, put them as zero. Nobody's gonna be looking at them and this went on for years. This went on for years,
I
and
don't think-
nobody ever complained. And we have a new way of doing it. We're not gonna say anybody's wrong, but placeholder was the way to go, and nobody ever questioned when we started.
So to your point though, Martha, I think what you had said earlier around focusing on the explanation, the detailed explanation, the funding sources, all that stuff is really relevant for the
Absolutely.
budget
Absolutely.
in that year and how it will impact me as a resident.
Joe
Exactly.
We
provides
can
that
show
to
the
us.
plan, but I would think we would do the town a disservice to spend too much time trying to speculate on that at an annual town meeting especially.
Exactly.
But rather spend that time explaining to them what each line item in the budget is.
Which
I
is,
think-
There's
which is even
questions.
more support for why do we need a 2/3 vote?
Yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah.
I'm with you. Now that I get that more, I get 100%.
I think when we present to the board is very concerned, what does the future look like? And Joe, part of his job is to explain this is the future. But our job is, we looked at the capital plan, we looked at the capital budget. The budget is what we're really concerned about this year. And how can we affect either lowering it, or if we have to, what's gonna affect to bring it up?
And I think to Joe's point, when we looked at the out years, we were in that range of 2.5 to 5 million ex wastewater and water.
And let me put a caveat
And that
on,
seemed reasonable.
for
It
the new
seemed very
members, let me just
reasonable.
put a caveat. This committee has always worked as the town administrators committee. Okay?
What does that mean?
He sits on it,
Nope.
or you sit.
I sit at it, so if I may, Mr. Chairman,
With him.
chapter 9 says, well, throughout the, chapter 3, if I'm remembering correctly, nope, sorry, chapter 4 is the town administrator chapter. And within that, it says, I must, in consultation with the capital outlay, develop a capital plan. Chapter 9, it says that the capital outlay committee works with the administrator in supporting his plan, or something to that effect. So the way it's always been is,
Sense?
you
It's
folks are
different
the,
than-
but you folks are the public body, because when I first started, someone said, well, you know, your committee, and I said, I don't think I serve on any committees, let alone have a committee, and they said, no, capital outlay is your committee, and I said, well, I haven't seen anywhere that's, so it's not that, it's, you are a public body, and your purpose is to partner with me in developing capital outlay plans.
Yeah, I agree. with
That's
that.
different than,
Yeah, I mean, the same as I would look at the finance committee working on behalf of the board of selectmen or whatever, or you and saying.
So I
the
say the
taxpayer.
FinCom works on behalf of the town meeting
Yeah,
as the executive, but absolutely, right.
yeah, I mean,
Yep.
it's, yeah, I get that. That makes
okay, so we're not,
But to me, if I may, the whole point is, because the charter tells us that, you know, that's the charter's role. If the charter didn't say that, then I always go back to it. The charter says under chapter 4, that the town administrator, and the same charter that knows that we have a finance director, that knows that we have a finance committee and a board of selectmen, says that the town administrator shall develop a comprehensive annual budget covering all programs and projects of the town. That's a unique aspect generally in the Commonwealth, that not every town administrator or town manager has that charge. They're evaluating the charter, and if that changed, so be it. I would never lose sleep over that, because it doesn't change the fact that I still have to administer that budget. But
Okay, so-
that's why I go back to it. Our charter, as presently written, has unique aspects in it, and we can't ignore it, and we have to correct it. And when I say we, I don't mean this committee, I mean everybody.
let me just ask you, I want to go to, well, section C or Article C, discussion on membership we have 2 membership vacancies. I forget from what, from what.
So one would be a representative of not from necessarily, but of the planning board.
Okay,
So the new interview committee for the Board of Selectmen is Larry Ballantyne returning and Julie Kavanaugh joining him. Ellen Powell in my office made them aware of that vacancy, so they're gonna partner sooner rather than later with the planning board to get a representative, the sixth person in. And then your colleague Bruce Nightingale has opted not to renew his term, and so I believe his appointment is a Board of Selectmen appointment. So I believe Board of Selectmen, Administrator,
finance.
Board of Selectmen, Finance Committee, Planning Board kind of thing. So it's meant to be a 7-member committee. You folks need to be 7 members, and the selectmen are aware of that and are working on that.
Okay, so we'll take care of that. So the final one is to talk about, before we take it to a vote, is to discuss, when do you want to meet again? What day is best? What time is best? So that we have a quorum, because we don't do anything without a quorum. So we need 3.
You need 4,
4?
because it's meant to be a 7-member
Oh,
body.
out of 7 instead of out of 5.
Yep.
Now, how is that defined in terms of like calling in or Zoom or whatever the hell?
So the governor's directive on remote participation and
Yes,
remote
that's-
access to meetings is set to expire July 15th of this year. There's legislation pending and bills that try to make it permanent to some level. In addition to that, the Board of Selectmen is reevaluating their pre-COVID remote participation, which would be you folks, as well as remote access, which would be the general public. So right now, we're leaning heavily towards meetings in person, televised at some point at present. If I can also throw one more thing out there. As you consider your meeting schedule, I would just say that the preponderance of the people that would be coming before you are staff. And so we are regularly open 8:30 to 4, and it's easier for me to have staff participate during regular business hours. Having said that, I know at least one amongst you still works in the real world, and I'm trying not to look at them. So I wanted to be mindful of that as well as you discuss, what may work best. But to ensure that I have as many department heads come before you, it's helpful to have it someday during the workday if at all possible. And then last but not least, as a former town clerk, I'm always mindful of the general public. And what I would say is, although the public may not be able to participate greatly, they're given several opportunities, which is why the charter reads that way, at night between Board of Selectmen and Finance Committee meetings to weigh in on that process as well.
Okay.
Joe, can I?
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to ask one clarification, because there was one meeting that I called into, but I wasn't considered present to account for the quorum, I believe. Is that correct?
I think it had to do with you had not yet had a chance to take your oath of office.
No, I had.
Okay.
So
Yeah, ours was the
if you
same.
call in, are you considered part of the quorum?
Yes, the only one who
Okay.
cannot,
Is that the question?
say again?
Can you vote if you do remote?
You can. And so there was a policy that was developed when the open meeting law changed in 2010. So take COVID out of the equation for a moment. The Board of Selectmen back in 2012, I think, had developed a policy, and they were actually ahead of the curve on it. What they talked about is they incorporated elements from the open meeting law. The chair can participate remotely, but not be the chair.
Right.
The person who presides, the presiding officer must be present. A quorum of the body must be present. Now, again, this is pre-COVID, not COVID governor stuff, but how it works before we went into that lovely world. So a majority has to be present in person. Whoever presides over the meeting has to be in person. So if it's not the chair, he could call in but can't preside.
So 3 of us or 4 of us can't call in, and we wouldn't have a quorum.
So 3 of you could call in if it was a 7-member board,
Okay.
but not 3 of you right now.
So I suggest everybody be here. No, okay, so
My question,
let's go, I'm
Oh, I
sorry,
just-
Bob, go ahead.
are town hall hours changing at all during the summertime?
No, the board's meeting is changing mercifully, did I say that? No, Monday through Friday, 8:30 to 4, except for regular holidays.
Okay.
So Friday is still open,
Correct.
regular day.
Correct.
That would
Okay.
be my preference.
Okay. Now, say that again? I'm gonna go around the horn.
Okay, go ahead.
Do you have any special days?
Wednesdays are not good for me,
Okay, so Wednesday's out.
sorry,
Okay, so Martha,
kids.
Wednesday's out. Bob?
I prefer Fridays. I usually try to work from home on Fridays, so.
Okay, so, let me get, Martha, you're good at
I'm-
anytime, 9 to, whatever, 8
Yep.
to 5?
Yep.
Or right, 8 to 5? Morning, Friday?
9 o'clock is good. Drag you out of bed?
I gotta walk the dogs. Yes?
I don't have
Do
any,
you have any preference?
no day preference, just, I prefer afternoon, but
Afternoon? Okay, Karen. PM, so we have an issue there. And Bob, I'm sorry, Mark?
I'm open to whatever.
Okay.
If you wanted to do an afternoon, 2 o'clock on a Friday, is that 3 o'clock? I mean, how much time do you think?
Let me pick it.
So,
Wait a minute.
I was just wondering about the availability of staff to be here.
No, but
So,
normally
how much
we,
time we're gonna need?
the majority of meetings we have, let me, this is how I see the schedule looking and what we're doing. Joe is gonna try to be here every meeting.
correct.
Okay. Whether we have staff come in, I think staff, the unique one is getting Sean Libby here with Joe to discuss what we discussed on item A, okay? What I foresee, and this is up to when the town administrator wants to start, and I think he has, is the request forms for capital expenditures will be going out or are out.
We'll be going out very soon.
Okay, so let's say first week of July,
Correct.
okay?
Yep.
You're gonna give them a week or two, so we're looking at, for the sake of argument, the beginning of August, to have 3 or 4 or 5, depending on, I'm gonna use a simple word, the bigness of their request. You're gonna get like DPW in perhaps with someone else. We might have 3 or 4, the culture, the senior center, rec department, the smaller requests that we can anticipate come in and talk about what they need. And we can put 3 or 4. I think we're looking about 14, maybe 15 departments. How many you got? That would be reporting or having capital.
Correct. For capital needs, we'll call it 15.
Yeah, so you're talking about coming in, giving them about a half hour each. So the meeting's gonna last at least an hour and a half to 2 hours, should we have. And the smaller ones, like the library and so forth, they meet 20 minutes. I mean, this is something that they know, kind of thing. So we wanna knock them off, and we can start knocking off the requests and understand them, the initial interview with them by the middle of August. I'm picking that, or by the end, something I said.
Everybody wave their arms or move around or stand up, or what does it take? So the town's green initiatives work.
So anyway, we can get done, hopefully by the end of August, the request. And then the formality starts about preparing for the presentation. And this is what we were discussing with the bylaw committee the other day, is within the bylaws, it says that this committee and the town administrator will be presenting their numbers to the finance committee, and then to the finance committee and the board of selectmen
Jointly.
jointly. And that happens before,
So it says in December.
right.
Right,
So-
not before, but in December.
So what, we're trying to back out, so we have October, November to get everything together. And during that time, we can have committee, or departments come in if we request them, like the harbor master. You know, if there's any changes, come on, in, you know, so that, or we have more questions about dredging or whatever, that gives us the opportunity. So we're getting an early, compared to past years, we're getting an early opportunity, August, September, to start the process and have it completed by the charter request date of December something. So can we live with that? Is that okay with you guys?
Sounds great.
Yes?
I agree, but we got more immediate things about the 204 Sisson Road. Do we have to wait till August to get that data?
Well,
You know,
it's not immediate because, I mean, it's immediate. Is there any target date to have something from us or whatever for the 204 Sisson Road? I mean, what's the scoop? I
Thank
mean,
you.
we've been asked to look at it. Yeah, so,
So the scoop is, it's an ongoing process,
Yeah.
meaning, there are no elements of it in fiscal year '23, and that was the intent of facilities at the time. I also want to put out there, I've broached it to the board has not yet contemplated if they're going to impact upon the pilot program that started this all, that is set to expire in April of 2024. So what I'm dealing with is an existing building that has staff and tenants or users in the building. So it's an ongoing discussion. It's not going to be, here's the answer in August of 2022. It's going to be more, here's the plan for 24 through 28, if I remember those years correctly, as we've been discussing. So to what the chairman just said about your schedule, if you folks have bandwidth to meet in July, you can continue that discussion immediately on 204, and then know that it will be built into the overall process for the full plan.
you got that? I think there were discussions, and I remember seeing it on TV, that the chairman, the select board chairman, said that the selectmen, the finance committee, and then he said, and of course, the capital outlay committee will meet to discuss 204 Sisson Road. I remember hearing that.
At a future meeting, correct.
At a future meeting.
That was part of an answer to talk about why.
And then Martha and I were at that, no, we're at a previous meeting where we volunteered from the capital outlay committee to be on a quote-unquote committee, subcommittee, or whatever it's called, to address from the capital outlay. And I don't know who from your committee volunteered or were going to be selected. And it might be Dana and Peter. I don't know.
It's us.
No, they have an immediate response.
Yeah,
it's
it's
them.
us or me as the lead, but with Mark, yeah.
Okay, well, that's great, because then,
So, Mr. Chairman, if I could jump in, knowing that that was the vote of the Finance Committee, knowing that the two of you are interested, knowing that we've got another member plus two more, that's why I initiated the on-site inspection to
Yeah,
start
that's
with you
good.
folks.
so we can, you'll have someplace to talk about your visit with us.
Yeah, and I, just to get back to the goals, so I agree that we do want the capital outlay plan for Sisson Road for 24 to 28. I mean, that makes sense. We want it legitimately in the capital outlay plan, is we, with more work behind it. We all
Absolutely.
agree to that.
It's,
It's about when do we, you don't agree with that?
no, I don't see it as being an individual item being on the capital plan.
So I potentially do.
Okay. This is
I
where we
potentially
haven't
see it
even-
under administration or facilities.
Okay.
The
It's where it
alert,
fits.
the alert would be that you should all be prepared to see other municipal buildings
Okay.
more prominently on the plan as well.
It has never been on the capital plan.
Yeah, and that's what we were talking about,
Exactly.
coming out of the building a little bit, but
Or
it was just,
facilities.
it's more about, yeah, it's reasonable to consider all, I mean, we have to consider all buildings, we're just
Yeah.
happen to be starting here.
Exactly, yeah.
Because that's the hot button that was driven by the cultural center, kind of quote-unquote. thing, and I agree with that. So my point in all the work all the talk, all the work, all the rumors, everything that's been related to this building and this project since the past year, since I got on the finance committee, really came to a head at the town meeting. And so my view, and I think what we sort of committed to, was coming back to the town with as much information as we can to sort of put context around what it's gonna take to get this building ready to do whatever it is we decide how we wanna use it.
Yep.
And that's more or less saying to fill out the capital plan for this building, which is, right now, just nobody's had the time to do, which is fine. And now it's getting real information, real data, real analysis through a sort of a joint committee or group, I wanna say group, to just get better information for the town.
Through a real public body built for that purpose.
Yeah, just to get better information.
Yep.
Or more complete information about
But
that.
are
And
we, I'm sorry.
So in terms of timing, I believe if nothing else, the very latest, we want to come to the table with some kind of, we're going to have to present our work and our results of that work at the town meeting at the very latest, but we want to do something well ahead of that to start to grease the skids on what we're going to present, is my opinion. So when you talk about timeline, it's got to be, it can't get lost in the shuffle with the budget discussion. Meaning, everything else, we're starting this work now, our opinion, at least my opinion from a finance, we wanted to start it now so it wouldn't get lost in the shuffle with the budget stuff, which we know is all, it's very intense. And so we want to be able to come back with good information, and we can't afford to say, sorry, we didn't have time.
Right.
That's not right.
Well, I have a slightly different
Sure.
approach. And my approach is that facilities management, or Sean, when he presents his budget, 204 Sisson Road is in his purview. It's not our responsibility. We have to feed him. This is what I'm thinking. That building is gonna come, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't agree.
I don't think you're at cross purposes.
Yeah.
Meaning, I work for the Board of Selectmen, Link Hooper works for me, Sean Libby works for Link. You know, that's the hierarchy, if you will. Having said that, I am in constant contact with both Link and Sean about the building. To Karen's points, this is why I was excited about today, to have a public body, first, most related to capital, the Capital Outlay Committee, start that discussion and see the building, and to continue those discussions. Because my position has always been that culture was a side conversation. And as you know, a director of cultural affairs is set to come into the town as the formal position that was adopted at town meeting in May of this year, in early fiscal year '23. The question still remains, what are we going to do with the building? And that's where I agree with everything that Karen and by extension Mark and Chairman Peter Hughes and others have said from Finance Committee. Because I have an existing municipal building that's in use, just like I'm in a municipal building that's in use that needs, repairs and everything else. But it is fair to say that 204 Sisson Road is far behind everybody else because we, the town, haven't made it a priority. The last point I want to put out there, because I think it's going to help the discussions you have, is again, knowing that the Board of Selectmen has a program, a pilot, if you will, an analysis of their own that is set to expire in April 2024. I told them for planning purposes, and I want to emphasize that phrase, for planning purposes, I'm assuming, bad word, but you can use it when you plan, that the board will either extend or continue that study period set to come up in April of 2004 for a period of at least 5 years. So the preposition is, let's assume that 204 Sisson Road is going to remain as a municipal building with some uses while we evaluate the uses and the needs for the building. That's a way of me saying, board, you have the ability, as you know, to take up that question sooner rather than later. I don't know that they're just predisposed to do that yet. So that's why I think we need some date in mind.
Yeah,
And so for me, it's an eye towards a 5-year plan. First year is gonna be fiscal year 2024, which we're working on anyway. And that's why I think it gels nicely.
and I think the part that Richard didn't make, state about what's important about this project is how the town plans to use the building. And it, again, that's a plan as much as the numbers are a plan. So they just come together, right? If they say they
Part of the
think,
plan.
you know, 3 years from now, we want the auditorium to be ready to do X, Y, and Z because we have a partner, go, okay, so that's what's gonna feed. The feeds, just helps you get to the numbers that feed the plan. So to me, it's that I would love to be able to have, we have to be able to come, in my opinion, a structure, a framework that suggests that we came up with these, it could be 2 line items, it doesn't have to be 50 things, it could be,
Right.
these are the things that we see most likely to be happening in the next few years. Maybe, you know, you speculate on the 4 or 5 year, whatever, but it just has to be something like, what process did we go through? What was the thinking? Who contributed to the use study, which I think is nothing to do with the finance committee, is everything to do with you guys.
Exactly.
You know, the town administrative.
Community
board of
outreach and what have
It's
you.
gonna, I don't really care.
Yep.
And then we need to say, what does that mean from a standpoint of money to support that? And that's that's revenue projections as well as what it would take to upgrade or get the building to where it needs to
Well,
be.
let me make
So-
a suggestion.
Can I just build off of Karen's point for a
Go
minute? So I hear that, you know, additive to let's say the existing capital plan will be Sisson Road, but may also be this building or other municipal buildings. Is that what you said?
Yes, because some of them have appeared on the plan, but what I've tried to say consistently is, we haven't looked at 204 Sisson Road as a building, because we don't look at our buildings as a buildings.
Right.
And so that
so
sort of culture needs to change as well.
Here is sort of my thought on that. One, the town, you and the select board have to tell us what the priority is gonna be, because again, I see those numbers as additive to that plan, and they could be significant. So, you know, we have the wastewater thing, and now we're gonna get real, in my words,
Mhm.
about
Yep.
buildings. And so it is gonna be, in addition to having all the items in the plan,
Mhm.
it's gonna be a prioritization and a timing that's gonna be driven by the select board and your office. But I'm gonna be a little bit critical here, probably, some people aren't gonna like what I say, but my initial observation is that the town has a history of identifying these kinds of things, but then not following through and consistently. You can't say you're gonna re-envision a building and then put a new roof on and call it done. Like, if there are 5 things that need to be done, we need to have the fortitude as a town, and I know it's expensive, to carry through. Otherwise, we get in a situation like we're in right now, where the buildings are, you know, their useful life isn't as good as it used to be, right? We need to upgrade them. I also think this will be, my second point, a test of this 2/3 vote. This may be hard to get through.
Mhm.
So,
Let me suggest something, because we have, we have the capital plan, budget or whatever. We have that capital plan to be concerned about. We've got, these are jobs that are put on us. We've got the plan, we've got Sisson, and we got wastewater.
right,
When we have our meetings, I don't want to limit, if we should have meetings directly related to one of those topics. Because we've got to focus on the plan, and it takes a lot of focus. And we're going to be taking a lot of focus when these people are coming in and giving us the requests and having them back. It takes a lot of time. I don't want to short time them because we've got to worry about, well, the roof at Sisson Road needs work and we've got to address what the cost. I think what we should do is limit our time to meetings that are going to be focused on the plan, a meeting that's going to be focused on Sisson Road, and I know we're going to be focused on wastewater. So I make a recommendation that we don't hybrid the meetings and try to focus
No, that
on one topic each time,
No,
because
I think it all has to go into the plan. We need to make sure
I'm
we've
not
got everything
talking, I'm
into the
talking
plan.
about our meetings and what we're asking people to talk about. That's what I'm talking about. I think we're gonna lose something if we make them hybrid kind of thing, where we're talking about,
I'm not suggesting that, I'm just saying that,
I'm not suggesting that you suggested it. I'm saying the way I'm planning the meetings that we're going to have that you said you're all available for. I'm asking, okay, I'll ask a question. Should it be hybrid where we mix things, or should we focus on one thing, get it done, get it done, get it done, and focus on the next meeting, which is going to be, you know, the 204 Sisson Road, and that's all we discuss. And if we have people coming in, it's to discuss Sisson Road. Or if it's wastewater, it's wastewater. I'm throwing it out to you.
What's the priority now? I mean,
I
is
think we can
Sisson Road a priority more than,
Or is the
The
capital outlay plan the priority?
You can't do one without the other. How do you?
No.
Right, right, so they're all my priority, and the way that I deal with them is through the capital outlay plan. With regard to wastewater, I said it earlier, Mass DEP has given us notice, and we're having a meeting next week, that they're ramping up Commonwealth-wide with an emphasis on Cape Cod on more that needs to be done on nitrogen abatement. That's gonna be a game changer for us, and that's why I'm saying that I don't look at wastewater as simply a capital item, whereas buildings I do more of. I think I've heard you all, and what I would encourage you to do is keep doing what you're doing. First of all, this meeting today, from my perspective, is fantastic. Because, and it's 5 of you. When you have 7 of you, it's gonna be even better. The immediate discussion right now, or the timely discussion, maybe, Bob, is a better way for me to say it, is 204 Sisson Road. And rightfully so. We have a department head coming in July. So it makes sense to me that you'd be talking about that foremost right now. As you develop the plan for 24 and beyond, you gotta factor everything else in. So there will be an appropriate time sometime this summer for Dan Pelletier from the Water Wastewater Department as our superintendent to join me in a conversation with you folks on what's happening generally on water projects, wastewater projects. And we're gonna have to advise you, the Board of Selectmen and FinCom, on what's coming out of our meeting next week with Mass DEP. Now, our meeting next week is a precursor to what they plan to do over the summer. So we won't even know what DEP really plans to do until the fall. But at least we're aware of it, and we can factor it into your planning over the next 4 and 5
Okay,
years.
so that we've been here almost an hour and a half, so why don't we do this? Joe, will you find out when you can have, or
So what I think I heard,
a site visit with
Sean
Sean
Libby,
on
yep.
one of those times? We're talking about a Friday,
So what I thought I heard is that you can do meetings generally on Fridays.
right?
It may be late morning or afternoon. However, on that one particular topic, the Public Works Department and the Water Department are 2 departments that close at 12 noon on Fridays.
I'll do mornings. I never said, yeah. it's
No,
not-
meaning,
so I can-
for those, you might have to adjust. For the others, you can still do the afternoon, but it sounds like Fridays are in play.
Okay,
And if that's the case, I can work with that, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I can.
So we're
adjust
gonna-
as well.
we'll just wait for you telling us the next meeting in the next couple of weeks.
So my first request would be, at the conclusion of this, if each of you could email me and tell me dates, weeks, and times that don't work. Because I can tell you, we're coming into the summer season, and I will be gone the end of this month into early July, and then probably at the end of the summer. So I need to hear the same things from you folks. And I think if we can get 2, maybe 3 meetings in, we're doing very well.
Okay, we're good?
yeah, we're good.
Do I hear?
Make a motion to
Motion.
adjourn?
second?
The meeting is now adjourned.
Aye.
A vote?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
We're good.
Thank you,
Thanks, Joe.
folks.